Today is March 28th. This is Jennifer Park recording Polly
Radosh.
I'm sorry. Okay. So, talking about WOW. I guess I just want to start was there anything you wanted to start saying about yourself first or before? No?
No.
Okay. Just what years were you involved or how, can you tell me anything about how it started or?
Well, it began as a group of faculty, primarily women, although there were some men aligned as well, who were interested in changing some of the policies on campus and advocating for better opportunities for women, child care, upward advancement within the institution, more hiring, more gender equity in general.
Was there a specific event that happened that made this happen, or just a combination of?
It was a convergence of many events. In the 1960s, it was a very male-dominated institution, and advancement was primarily a system that focused on the attributes of men, and women were overlooked. Even well-qualified women were overlooked. Hiring had a strong preference for male candidates, and women were not frequently hired. And then when they were hired, they were often not supported in their roles, whether we're talking about faculty members or administrators or at any level.
Were there other women organizations at the time, or do you think WOW was the first really impactful one?
At Western, you think?
Or just in Macomb, yeah.
I didn't live in Macomb at that time, so I don't really know very much about what was going on in Macomb.
Okay.
But I think WOW was primarily set up to focus on the interests of women at the university. Yeah. There were other groups. There was a women's group on campus, but they were primarily wives of male faculty members, and they, did cooking and needlework, and their interests were not the same interests.
You're talking about the Wives Club, or
yes.
The Faculty Wives Club?
Yeah, the Wives Club, it was called at that time.
I'm sorry, where were you living before Macomb?
Oh, I was a student at Southern Illinois University.
Oh. Okay. I'm really interested in women's studies, and I've taken one class, but I was so interested, I was just curious, you were here when that started, I think?
I wasn't here for the first offering of First Women's Studies course. Betty Casper is the one who was primarily involved in getting that course. And the course itself had a very difficult time getting going. The administration continually threatened to cancel the course and not let it go forward. And the women faculty actually registered for that course to keep it going for a period of time, and then eventually it took off. I came on board in 1984 and developed a few courses for what was then the Women's Studies minor, and those courses grew significantly, and we began to see the growth in the minor. I took over as director of the Women's Studies program in 1995, and then 2004 we became a department. We built the program during those 9 years in between, and we saw quite a bit of growth.
What do women's studies majors usually do with their major? I'm just curious.
Anything. You'll find women's studies majors in any walk of life. There's a University of Minnesota used to put out a listing of the types of things that that people who majored in women's studies did, and they were archaeologists, and they were doctors and lawyers and journalists, and you just pick a field and it's appropriate.
That's really I think I remember somebody talking about that. I wanted a third minor, but so
it's a good companion. And I used to tell my students that women's studies is, if you want it for a minor, is just an excellent pairing with something that most people wouldn't think of it being associated with, like criminal justice or something.
I'm an English major, so I think it definitely changed my perspective. Like, all my papers have been, like, really feminist now.
Okay.
But, yeah, I guess, I was curious, like, how much it's changed, like, since you saw it at the beginning and now. I mean, obviously now it's a major, but, is it, like, completely accepted now, or, like, do you still have problems?
So. Well, there are still people who think, why don't we have men's studies or something like that? And, you know, there is a wider understanding of how a men's studies program might dovetail with a women's studies program. But traditionally, and by long-standing tradition, the entire university was a men's studies program, and we had to bring in women and other traditionally underrepresented groups in order to give voice to those other experiences.
Yeah, I interviewed Elaine Hopkins before, and she was talking about Betty Casper, and hoping that someone was going to interview her, and I don't know. Sorry. Oh, like, sorry.
That's right. Go ahead.
Campus policies, there's, like, a few things I was just curious what you thought about, like how, like, the abuse of birth control, and, like, I mean, I'm doing a URD project on sexual discrimination, like, from our interviews, and I was just curious if you had anything.
Well, campus policies, WOW worked primarily on campus policies that affected women faculty and staff, although there was a concern for students. And things like housing issues and medical treatment and child care for students was sort of a subfield that the WOW organization worked on. But what we found is that as things improved for faculty and staff, so did they also improve for students, because our perspectives broaden. Things like the availability of birth control, I mean, it just makes common sense that health option would be available for students.
So did that just happen, or that didn't have anything to do with it?
Actually, I don't know when that came in. It's been quite a while, but I don't know when that came in.
And they have a child care center on campus now, or like I've seen like did WOW have anything to do with that, or did that just, was that for studying children? Or like?
Well, others could probably speak better to this, but I'll tell you what I do know about it. There was originally a lab school on campus that was a K through 12 school, which was separate from the child care facility. But when that lab school was closed down, the presence of children on campus stayed. And I'm not exactly sure when the child care center opened. I do know that when my own children were small, the waiting list was longer than their childhood.
Wow.
I put a name on the list for my daughter when I was pregnant for her. She's 28 now. I've never been called. It's a pretty long waiting list. It was a perk that was available for a few people, and it was very, very difficult to get in. Now there are other options. Now there are a wider range of options throughout the entire community, and it's not, the need is not quite as great as it was at one time.
Yeah.
But there still isn't a center for students, specifically for students.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think that's where the testing center is. So I always go over there and I see all these kids running around and stuff. I guess I kind of asked this already. I said, what was the environment like when you got to WIU? And, like, how has it changed? I don't know. I kind of asked that already.
When I came to WIU in '84, there were very few women on campus. But the time that I came, very few people in general were hired, male or female. We were in a very difficult budget time. So the women that were here mostly had been hired in the 60s. So I became very interested in connecting with women who were a generation older than I, because there weren't really very many other women on campus at all at that time. So it was there were women in that generation of 60s and 70s, and then there were women who were hired in the 90s, but in the 80s there just weren't very many women here at all. But we started talking about it, and it became a focus and an interest in trying to expand the representation of women on campus during those years. It was a difficult place to be because you go into a committee or something and you'd be the only woman in the room. It was also difficult because the supports that are in place now, like family leave, were not there. I had to find a student who would take over my classes when I had a baby, and it was my responsibility, and I was expected to be back 2 weeks after the baby was born. It was difficult. It was very difficult. There was no release time or adjustment in any way in your teaching schedule or the expectations for the tenure clock. You couldn't opt out for a year or anything like that when you had children. So it was quite difficult for women.
Did they... That's strange. I didn't realize that was like that.
Oh, yeah, it was very tough. When I was in grad school, I was teaching. I had a baby in March, and I didn't get a single day off for when I had her. I had her on a Monday, and I was in the classroom on Thursday because there was no provision at all.
Wow. I couldn't do that. I guess I was just curious, like, what you... You're still teaching here?
No, I just taught a class in a friend's class, but I'm retired.
Okay, that's what I thought, and then you told me you were teaching, so I was like, maybe I didn't get that information right. What kind of activities are you still involved in?
Well, I just recently moved back. I retired from WIU, and I went on to be a dean at a university in New York State, and I just moved back just this last summer, so...
Were there, like, the same sort of organizations there? Like, wow.
No,
not at all.
No. This is pretty unique.
It's good.
It is good.
I asked Elaine, and she didn't know about the Take Back the Night. Mm-hmm. Is that a WOW organization or something that they do?
It's out of the Women's Center, and the Women's Center is something that was developed as a result of the activities of WOW members. The first Women's Center opened, it must have been around 1980, but Janine Kavickia could give you the answer on that. When the Women's Center opened, it was the result of the activities of WOW. And they take over the Take Back the Night and orchestrate that. It was the Women's Center opened maybe 85. It would have been 85.
Yeah, I just think that's really... I've never gone. I just, like, drive by and I can see, like, all the lights and stuff. Mm-hmm. I think they do that in a lot of places, so, like, not just Western. So. Yeah. I guess for my, like, URD project, I was curious if you had any specific examples about sexual discrimination, like that, or how you were discriminated against. Mm-hmm. Any, if you want.
Here?
Yeah, or in general, like, just... I think we are doing more specifically Western. So.
Mm-hmm. Well, I've not really felt discriminated against at Western in overt ways. It's not, we're going to hire a man because we don't want a woman kind of thing. But I will say that the number of highly qualified women who are promoted up at WIU, as in many places, is not very high. Often what you see is that women who are promoted and get to higher levels are not the ones that are the strongest or the most overt, as you might find for men. An assertive, forward-working man is very likely to be moved up, but an assertive, forward-working woman is not. So there is representation of women at higher levels, but it's very difficult for women who are strong, independent, to go up. And I think that's kind of a subtle discrimination that many women have experienced here. and I can think of half a dozen women who have had great ideas over the last couple of decades and would have been powerful, very wonderful leaders at higher levels, and they're not likely to be promoted. But as for overt discrimination, I never really felt that here.
Okay.
It was very subtle.
Do you think that when you were saying that, do you think that's still a problem now, or was that, or more than, or is that what you're saying?
I think less of a problem now, but
yeah.
if you look at the pictures that flash on the webpage of administrators or people who are at high levels in the institution, what you'll see is a lot of men and very few women. You get a picture of 15 people and there may be one woman.
Wow.
Look at them.
Okay,
just look at the
I
website
will.
and see who flashes up. Students, you get pictures of students who are male and female.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering about, like, how Western used to be, if it was just the faculty that was, it was like, I don't know how to articulate this just a second. If it was just the faculty, if it was the students too, like, that treated the female professors differently.
It was both. The first class I walked into, my first day on campus at Western, I was a brand new faculty member, and so the students would see the name on their schedule, but they didn't have any idea who it was. My first class I walked into, and there was a guy sitting in the front row, and as I walked in the room, he said, "Oh no, it's a woman." He had no idea what kind of a faculty member I was. Easy, hard, interesting, boring. He had no idea, but he was going to prejudge on the basis of whether I was a male or a female. I had students in those early years question my credentials. If I sat on a thesis committee or something, they'd ask me my credentials. And at first I thought it was just because I was so young. But as I got older, those things still happened. Wow. So students did react. But as more women showed up on campus and it became more normative, those things dissipated. And I think students are different now as well. They've grown up in households that are more equitable and with a wider variety of family patterns and situations, and things are a little different than they were 30 years ago.
Yeah, when I was in my women's studies class, there were like 2 guys, maybe 3 guys, and I was kind of disappointed because they didn't say anything the whole time. Like, I just thought, like, why? I don't know if they were just taking it for because they thought they should, or.
Well, if you went back 30 years, you'd find that women in a physics class would have had the same experience, so that there would be 1 or 2 women out of a class of 30 students, and they would do the same thing. They'd be quiet, and I think there's an intimidation factor going on there. One of our first majors was a man, and he broke all stereotypes. He was an African-American male student on a football scholarship who was going to med school, and he majored in women's studies.
Oh, wow. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that the class was trying to stay away from, like, man-hating or, like, quote-unquote, but, like, a lot of the comments were kind of not nice towards men sometimes. Like, some of the students, not the teacher.
Students?
Yeah, sometimes, so. Maybe that's why they were nervous to say anything, because they're, like, the only guys, like, we're, like, talking about it, and then everyone turns around and looks at them, like, are you going to say anything?
Well, what I found in my classes, my women's studies classes, is often that women who have been silent for many years get a voice. They have an opportunity to speak, and sometimes some anger surfaces that they didn't even know they had themselves until they get an opportunity to speak.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Like, there was a lot of silent tension in the room, so I think there's a lot of, like, great things on campus. So, like, they have at the counseling center, they have, like, groups for rape victims, and they have where you make the T-shirts and they hang the T-shirt. What's that? The clothesline project. Yeah, I think all those things are really great. So. I
had a student in one of the first times I taught a women's studies class who was in my class, and she was so angry. She would come in and she would flip her book down and she was fit to be tied angry. And I thought it was me. I thought I was doing too much, too fast, and maybe I needed to back off. But what she was angry about was not what I was saying, but that she was a graduating senior and had never realized that women's studies was out there. And here was this whole field of study that she wasn't going to get to do because she was graduating. Yeah. So I think that we do a better job now of getting the opportunities out for students.
Yeah, I think that they advertise it pretty well.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
I'm kind of bad at questions. Yeah, I guess I was just trying to get as much information for my project too, because I didn't realize what my project was going to be when I did my last interview, so I don't really have. She did say that it was a very male-dominated place because she started here.
Is that Lane Hawkins?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, and she was in Peoria too, and she talked about that. So. I wasn't sure, what your other experiences were outside of Western, I guess, if you had. I don't know.
It's been hard. It's hard not to become bitter and angry, and some women become very bitter and feel that they have been oppressed, whether it be by society or by, the institution here or whatever. But I've always tried to not focus on those negatives. They happened, I'll give you an example. When we were quite young, my husband and I were quite young, and we had small children, he stayed home and took care of the kids while I taught here at the university. We bought our first house in 1985. We went to the local bank, to get a mortgage for the house, and they refused. He was a stay-at-home dad, and they refused to give us a mortgage on the basis of my faculty salary. They went back to look at his experience as a stock boy in the Jewel when he was in high school, and they gave us our mortgage on the basis of his work history as a grocery stock boy as opposed to my faculty salary. And that kind of discrimination in the 80s that was pretty normal.
Wow. I need to do
Macomb has come a long way, too.
Yeah. That's just amazing to me. I don't know, I'm pretty opinionated, though. My roommate, she's from a different country, so we have lots of disagreements about marriage and stuff. Mm-hmm. So she was just telling me yesterday that she agrees with multiple marriage, and I was like, oh my gosh, don't tell me these things.
Well, you have to accept the way people live for what they find in it. And we, for example, have a really hard time with an arranged marriage, but people in other cultures, they trust their parents who know them better to make those choices, and sometimes they work out just great.
Yeah, I think I accept other people's choices. I just feel like I need to tell them that there are other choices, because sometimes I feel like they think there's only one way and there's not. So I don't have any more questions. Is there anything else that you wanted to tell me about yourself? Or
I don't think so. If you have questions as you begin to work on your project, just send me an email.
All right. Well, thank you.
You're welcome. Sure. It's my pleasure.
Just look.